All right, seems like we have quite a few people here today, so why don't we get started? First of all, thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Phil Geiger. I'm the head of the concierge onboarding team here at Unchained. I've been a longtime Bitcoiner, and so talking about keys and vaults and multisig is a passion of mine. So I'm always happy to talk through kind of best practice security tips with Bitcoin, as well as get any of those questions that you have answered. So this webinar here is designed for folks who already have Unchained Capital vaults, but I'm hoping it'll be also just generally useful for people considering multisig in the future. So we're going to focus mostly on vault best practices and advanced functionality. Here's the specific agenda for today. So to begin, we're going to go over just a few key terms. So important terms that you'll want to understand in order to better understand how Bitcoin works. Then I'm going to go through a couple kind of specific demos of advanced features of vaults. So first of all, confirming the vault address on a cold card as well as a Trezor. Then I'm going to cover recovering from a vault with Caravan. So one of the most important questions that we get as a company when working with new clients is, well, what happens to my Bitcoin if Unchained Capital disappears? So I'm going to show off, our workflow for that apocalyptic scenario where Unchained disappears. And then finally, we've in the past year, we've released some advanced vault functionality. So for different contexts, such as retirement contexts or a family trust context or a business context, you can now onboard a legal entity and construct a vault in a new context with the same hardware wallets that you might use in an individual context. So you now have the option. You can use the same hardware wallets in different contexts, or you can use new hardware wallets in each context, but I'll show off if you do want to use the same hardware devices, but build a retirement vault, for example. After each one of these sections, or at least each demo section, I'm going to pause and answer a round of questions. So if you do have questions about what you're seeing today, feel free to ask in the Q&A or in the chat box. And my good friend Justine here is going to help us to prioritize questions and get through the most pressing ones. I won't stop after the kind of introduction because we're just going to plow through it. This is really designed just to establish a consistent terminology framework that I'll be using for the rest of the demo. But we'll stop after we confirm our addresses on our devices. All right, with that, let's dive into some key terms. So first and foremost, let's talk about a seed. A seed is the master private key that lives on a hardware wallet. So many of you have seen these little word lists that your hardware wallet generates for you when you set up your multi-signature vault, or really when you set up any hardware wallet. This 24-word list is the master key. So it is your primary secret, and it is always the most important item that you're protecting when you're setting up a vault or even just a single signature wallet. The seed lives on the device. By having the seed, you make sure to eliminate the device as a single point of failure. So these devices are all really good, but we should expect that over the long run, they will break or they might run into compatibility issues. By having the seed written down as a physical copy, you can then go and recover it onto a new device and be on your way. You can find and spend your Bitcoin addresses. From the seed, they can generate or derive nearly infinite individual private keys, which have corresponding public keys, and public keys are used to build addresses. So the seed, again, is the foundation of Bitcoin security. It's the most important thing you're protecting. An individual private key is a single key that is derived from a seed. The private key is used to construct and spend from a single address. So it's indirectly used to construct the address because a private key has a corresponding public key, but the public key is what's used to build a Bitcoin address. A public key can be thought of as like a lock, and you can build a Bitcoin address from one lock, or you can build a Bitcoin address from many locks. The private key is the key to the lock. It allows you to spend Bitcoin. Hardware wallets know how to use private keys and public keys to construct and spend Bitcoin addresses. So you can think of as your seed lives on a hardware wallet, your hardware wallet can derive an individual private key, and the hardware wallet knows how to use your keys, use and manage your keys. It's your user interface to your seed, or user interface to your keys. So moving on from private key, we have a public key. A public key is generated from a private key. So you derive down to a private key, you go through this encryption process, and you have a public key. Public keys are shared with wallet software in order to build addresses. So again, I think of the private key as like an actual key. The public key is like a matching lock to that key, and we're building a vault with 3 locks, right? 2 out of 3 keys are needed to open the vault. Hardware wallets know how to share public keys with wallet software in order to build addresses. And it is okay to share public keys with wallet software that you trust. You of course don't want to be sharing your public key with anybody, but you do have to share a public key if you want to build a Bitcoin address. And finally, this is what a Bitcoin address looks like. So many of you, I'm sure, have seen your Bitcoin address in your vault. Think about the blockchain itself as the database of addresses and the location of Bitcoin stored in the addresses. So the entire blockchain is really just a series of Bitcoin addresses and balances in them. Now the addresses individually, we don't know, who holds the keys to the addresses or how many keys were used to construct the address. But everybody in the world can see all the Bitcoin addresses and all of the balances in the addresses. When you set up your vault with us, you and Unchained know that the address that we built is a 2 out of 3 multisig address, but that's not information that we're sharing with the broader public. When you spend from an address, that's when it is announced or revealed that the address that you just spent from is a 2 out of 3 multisignature address. So Bitcoin, just to recap, live in addresses. Addresses are constructed from public keys. Public keys have matching private keys. Private keys live on the devices. Devices know how to use private keys to manage Bitcoin addresses. And finally, we have the question of the ages. What is an XPub? I wanted to include this here as well because XPubs are very important. It stands for extended public key. So if an individual public key is a lock, an extended public key is like a master lock. From the master lock, you can derive individual, like nearly infinite individual locks that you can use to build many different Bitcoin addresses, what we know typically as a wallet. So from a single extended public key, you can build a single signature wallet. When you combine multiple extended public keys, you can build a multi-signature wallet. And that's what we built when we set up our Unchained vault. Now that we have a foundation of these terms, what I'd like to do is hop into a demo of confirming our address on the device. So I'm going to swap over here and get logged into my Unchained account. When you log into your Unchained Capital account, of course, you have your username, your password, your 2-factor authentication. But what sets Unchained Capital apart from many of the other kind of businesses that you might be working with in Bitcoin is that the address, the account itself isn't what is delivering a primary amount of your security. It's protecting information about your Bitcoin, but what's protecting your Bitcoin are your keys and multi-signature. I'm going to hop into a vault. So after we've constructed our vault, you can see that we've produced a Bitcoin address here. Now, again, this address is publicly visible on the entire blockchain because, again, Bitcoin live in addresses and addresses are tracked and stored by the blockchain, which lives on 100,000 plus different computers around the world. But only we know that this address is a 2 out of 3 multisig. So one of the most important things or important sayings in Bitcoin is, first of all, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. You have to have the keys to your address. Otherwise, someone else has the keys to your address and you have to ask permission. But in addition, you shouldn't trust anything you see. So don't trust, verify is a very, very important concept in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is an immutable currency. And so if you make a mistake, typically it results in, a loss of funds or in a bad situation. So you really want to go slowly and make sure that that you can, verify everything that has been created, or for sure that the address that you're seeing here is controlled by your keys. So I'm going to plug in, actually, so I have my cold card plugged in right now. I'm going to confirm this address on my cold card. So once we construct this address, it's great. We can see our address, we can send Bitcoin to it, but how do we know that we can get Bitcoin out of the address in the future? Well, Cold Card and Trezor, two hardware wallets that we support here at Unchained Capital, have great functionality built in that allow you to view this address on the device. So you don't have to trust your computer. What you can trust is your cold storage hardware wallet. Now, what this tells us is that we have constructed this address according to the rules that we imagine. So when we build the address in the first place, it's a 2 out of 3 multisig. Our device will actually tell us that. So on the cold card, if you're using it, I'm going to try to hold this up to the screen here. Hopefully, maybe I'll stop sharing and make this a little bigger. All right, so on the cold card, you should have the Address Explorer functionality if your firmware is updated to the most recent version. In the Address Explorer functionality, the cold card is going to actually tell you a list of your Bitcoin addresses. So this first list of Bitcoin addresses here is actually the single signature addresses that are generated. So again, a hardware wallet can generate single signature addresses as well as multi-signature addresses. So this list up here are all the different types of single signature addresses controlled by this cold card. And again, what that means is the seed on the cold card has been used to build addresses where the private key is one of 1 keys needed to get the Bitcoin out of the address. But down at the bottom, what we can see, when we set up our cold card and built our vault, we actually loaded the vault onto the cold card and taught it about all of the addresses that are produced for our multi-signature vault. So I'm going to open this up. And then I see a series of addresses kind of listed at the top. All right, so scrolling down here, and I can see this is my first address. And what I can do is I can look at my vault and compare and make sure that what I see on my cold card matches what I see on my screen. So the cold card is going to show me the first 8 or 9 digits and then the last 8 or 9 digits of the address. And that looks good to me. So again, what this is my device telling me is, hey, I recognize this address. It's a 2 of 3 multisig address, which means that when we built it, somebody didn't sneak in 2 additional keys and make it a 2 out of 5 address. We know it's built correctly according to what we hoped. And then on top of that, it's also telling me that my computer isn't infected with malware that is finding Bitcoin addresses and replacing them with an attacker's address. So this is a really, really good check, and it's always an important check to do before you start sending Bitcoin to an address, is make sure that you actually have the keys to that address. So that's the cold card. So again, in order to do that on the cold card, you log in, you go to Address Explorer, you scroll down to the multi-signature wallet that you imported into the cold card, and you open it up. And then that first address that you scroll down to will show you is the first address of your vault. All right, so that's the cold card. Now I'm going to show how to confirm your address on the device with a Trezor. So today, Trezor and Cold Card are the only 2 hardware wallet manufacturers that have this functionality that are able to show and display your multi-signature address on the device. We're hoping that more hardware wallet vendors in the future will release that functionality, because it really does make you a lot more secure for multi-signature. So for the Trezor, all you do is you select Confirm on the device. You select the key that you have plugged in, and I have Mises right now, and then you'll hit Connect. Now I'm speaking with the Trezor Bridge or Trezor Connect, which is their open source tool that you download on the computer that you're running. It's communicating directly with the device, and it's asking the device, hey, can I share a Bitcoin address? Can I check a Bitcoin address? Is that okay? And we'll say, yes, that's okay. On the Trezor 1, you enter the pin here. On the Model T, you would have already entered the pin on your device. And then the Trezor here is going to display this address on my screen here is a 2 out of 3 multi-signature address. And then there's the pathway. So this pathway here is actually the location from my seed to the individual private key that controls this address. So seed plus this location equals the private key that controls this address. If this matches, which it does, then I can hit OK. And now I know for a fact that I have 2 out of 3 keys to my vault address. And so it's safe for me to start sending Bitcoin there because I have unilateral control of the funds. All right, I'm going to pause here and take a few questions. I know I covered quite a bit of technical stuff, so we'll see what questions there are, and I can hopefully answer them.
Yeah, Roy had a great one. He just was curious why some seeds are 12 words and some seeds are 24 words. So depending on the manufacturer of the device, maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, that is a great question. And the high level answer is that 12-word seeds and 24-word seeds are both part of the standard that was created for generating seeds like that. So, you know, the way that the master private key is actually mapped to those words is those words are from a library of, I believe, 2,048 words or over 2,000 words. And so each line is like picking one out of 2,048 words out of a hat. So really it's the difference between like 2,048 to the 12th power or 2,048 to the 24th power, but it's a very, very large number. So, you know, some wallets or hardware wallet manufacturers have chosen to go with the 24-word seed. Some have gone with the 12-word seed. But realistically, in multi-signature, it doesn't really have much of an impact on your security because multi-signature eliminates a given seed as a single point of failure. So even if one seed is bad, somebody hacks that seed, they don't have your money in multi-sig. In single signature addresses, so if the seed is 1 out of 1 keys in order to spend from an address, then it becomes a little bit more of a question. In that case, with a 12-word seed, maybe you add a passphrase, or maybe you just generate a 24-word seed and then you can split it up into 2 12-word chunks and geographically distribute it. With multi-signature, it's good to just simplify your life. Now that you've moved to multi-signature, keep your seed as a 12 or 24-word seed, whatever way it was generated.
So we also had a few more questions on seeds and lots of questions on addresses and then some just on the specific hardware. So
sure.
The other question on seeds, which I know is sort of a more loaded topic, but the question was the difference between Casa, another company that does collaborative multi-signature, and Unchained Capital. Casa requests that you don't keep your seeds. We request that you do. Somebody was just asking the difference as far as that goes and why we do it that way. So I know, again, loaded topic, but wondered if you could do just a quick overview of that.
That is a great question. And we by default recommend always securing your seeds. Seeds are the foundation of Bitcoin security. It is the thing that your hardware wallet generates for you. It is your master key. So there are some organizations that say, hey, you can get rid of 1 or more of your seeds, which, you know, is something you can do. I mean, you can cut your thumb off if you think it makes you look better. But the issue with doing that is that you're placing a lot more trust in these devices than you need to. So with all of these devices, they're all good again, but none of them are going to last for 20 years. They'll probably not last 10 years. They might. But if you have your seed, then you're eliminating the device as a single point of failure. So if and when it does break or some sort of firmware update is released that reduces compatibility, not an issue. You can take your seed, you can load it onto another device. So many multi-sig experts will actually recommend, like if you're going to do a larger multi-sig quorum, like a 3 of 5, have a couple of the seeds as just seeds. But loading the seed onto the device and then throwing the seed away, I don't think it really makes you more secure. Maybe it's slightly more user-friendly, but you're just placing a lot more trust in the hardware wallets than you need to. Part of Bitcoin security is minimizing trust, and none of the hardware wallet manufacturers, as well as software wallet vendors, recommend destroying seeds. I think Casa is kind of alone on that one.
Perfect. And then we had a question about addresses. There were a couple that kind of are similar, just essentially a question about reusing addresses. And then the more specific question was, is it correct that I can make dozens of deposits into my vault using the same address, but once I spend from that vault, I should generate a new public address and use that instead of the old one? That's from Roy. And then Tim just had a follow-up of, is it okay to reuse addresses for my multisig wallet?
Yeah, those are also excellent questions. And this is, there's a couple best practices. So first and foremost, a majority of the kind of security implications of quote unquote reusing addresses comes from when you've already spent from an address. When you spend from your address, so if I was to send a transaction out of this vault and spend this address, what I'm announcing publicly to the entire world of nodes and Bitcoin users is, hey, this address that I just spent from, it's a 2 out of 3 multisig address, and it was constructed with these 3 public keys. So spending from an address, and this is how any Bitcoin address really works, like single sig or multisig, you're announcing how it was kind of constructed. So that's really where we definitely don't recommend sending to old addresses that you've already broadcast from in really any context. Now, the other question is it okay to deposit to the same address multiple times before you spend from it? The answer is there is somewhat of, let's say, privacy implications of depositing to the same address multiple times, because you're somebody who's looking at all of the addresses on the blockchain might see that address and say like, oh, it's very likely that this address is controlled by one person, and they can track kind of the deposits back. But it's not the same sort of security implication as depositing to an already spent address. So the way that vaults work today is there's a single active address at a time that you will deposit to. When you spend from the address, then it changes to your new fresh address. So it all kind of depends on where you source your Bitcoin. If you're purchasing your Bitcoin from an exchange or something, not a huge deal if you're sending it to one address. If you really would like to have separate addresses to deposit to, you can always build a vault using the same 2 hardware wallets so that you have a fresh address each time. And this is also an area where at Unchained, we're working on enhancing our vaults to give you a little bit more flexibility within a given vault for multiple addresses.
Perfect. And one more follow-up on addresses, and I think the rest are more general questions that we can maybe save till the end. But Stephen asked, before Taproot's activated, aren't multi-signature addresses identifiable on the blockchain? He's saying believes he can see them. So I know you touched on when you spend, that's what showcases that you were in a multi-sig. So could you maybe touch on that just a little bit more for Stephen?
Sure. So there's different address types. So this is a P2SH address, and P2SH addresses are, yeah, you can kind of see that those are typically like multi-sig addresses, but they're also not exclusively multi-sig, at least from my understanding. So the technical details of that are a little bit beyond me exactly the differences there, but P2SH is a pretty common address type. All right. With that, I think I'm going to go into the next section of the demo. So one of the most common questions that we get from clients who are setting up vaults with us or who are coming to us for the first time is, what happens to my Bitcoin if Unchained Capital disappears? So we've designed vaults to eliminate all single points of failure, including Unchained Capital. And before I go into this kind of this recovery, let me just list off those single points of failure. By using multi-signature addresses and using multiple seeds, you're eliminating a given seed as a single point of failure. So if somebody gets a seed or one of your seeds is compromised, it doesn't result in a loss of funds. A lot of people maybe have heard of the ledger phishing hacks where people were coerced into entering their seed online. If you have a single signature address and you enter your seed online and you don't have another like passphrase or something, your funds are gone. In multisig, you can make a catastrophic mistake like that without losing funds. So by having multiple seeds and combining them in multisig, you're eliminating a given seed as a single point of failure. By having seeds, you are again eliminating your hardware wallet vendor as a single point of failure. If you throw away your seeds, you're relying on your hardware wallet vendor to release good firmware updates that don't break compatibility, which all of them unfortunately have released firmware updates that break compatibility for single signature and multisig, as well as you're relying on them not just breaking over time as they get used more and more. So having your seed again eliminates your hardware wallet manufacturer as a single point of failure. By having Unchained hold a key, in a lot of ways, you eliminate yourself as a single point of failure. So now a loved one, if something happens to you, a loved one can come to Unchained and we can work with them to recover your funds. We of course don't sign transactions for clients that just show up randomly, but if you have the right legal structure, such as a trust, or if you have a will and legal documentation, then we of course can help a loved one recover funds as long as they have one key or one seed or one device that's unlocked. The final way that we eliminate single points of failure is by eliminating unchained capital. So for all of our products and services, for vaults, for loans, where you're constructing multisig addresses, we give you this external spend information. So this is a single file, and what this file contains is all of the extended public keys used to construct the series of vault addresses. So remember, with extended public keys, you can generate kind of nearly infinite individual public keys, which are then mapped or used packaged to construct addresses. So by having all of the extended public keys for our vault, as well as the locations of the public key from the seed, we can then reconstruct our vault using open source tools. So we released a tool called Caravan, which lives in the browser at caravanmultisig.com in order to help our clients recover vaults without Unchained capital even existing. So in that apocalyptic scenario where the government shuts down all Bitcoin companies in the US, as long as you have your file plus your 2 keys, you can recover and spend your Bitcoin. This is categorically different than a third-party custodian, where if government shuts down Bitcoin companies, that means you no longer have your Bitcoin. If you don't hold the keys to your Bitcoin, you're trusting someone else with your keys. So Caravan, again, it lives at caravanmultisig.com, and really behind the scenes, it lives on GitHub, which is owned by Microsoft. It's also open source code, so you can create a copy of it and run it locally on your machine. And on top of that, it comes packaged in MyNode. So if you have a MyNode, you have access to Caravan from there as well. So it's open source, lives multiple different places, but at the highest level, it just lives on the browser. You don't need to install anything. You go to caravanmultisig.com, hit wallet, then you hit import wallet configuration, and you grab that file that you just downloaded. Caravan recognizes, oh, here are all of the extended public keys. You don't need to know Unchained's location because you can't sign with our key. All you need to know is the extended public key that Unchained gives you so that you can construct your vault. You can hit public here to connect to Blockstream's node, or you can hit private and connect Caravan to your own full node. But once you hit confirm, what Caravan does is it loads your series of vault addresses. So I can see here that this is my current address, which again, earlier I checked this address on both my devices. I can see my balance from Caravan. Normally you're gonna log into your Unchained Capital account to deposit funds and spend funds. But in that, awful scenario where for some reason, any reason, you can't access your Unchained account, you can use this file, recover it with Caravan, and then hit send here. So on this send tab, you can actually paste an address, so you can send your Bitcoin wherever you would like. You can author a fee, and then set the amount. Down here, you'll hit preview transaction, and Caravan will show you exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to send from this address to this address at this fee. If this looks good, you can hit sign. Then just like with your vault, you'll select whichever key you're signing with first. So I'll select Mises here, it's on my Trezor, and I will sign this transaction. So now I'm taken to Trezor Connect, where it's asking me, hey, is it cool if we sign this transaction? And that's what we want it to do. I'll enter my PIN here. And then on my device, I can see details of the transaction, which I can review here on my screen. And if that looks okay, I will give it approval. And what my device has done is it has used the private key to sign the transaction. And this is exactly what a transaction signature looks like. It's a series of alphanumeric kind of gibberish. So behind the scenes, when your device is signing a transaction, this is the type of thing that it's producing. So now that I've signed with my, my first device, I can plug in my cold card and sign the transaction on my cold card. So the cold card is a little bit more technical to sign transactions. We support air-gapped signing only, which requires passing around a little SD card. But the benefit of it is that you never need to connect your cold card to a computer. So what I'll do here is I will plug my little SD card into my computer. I'll select my key in Caravan, and DeSoto here lives on my cold card. Got my SD card plugged in. Then I will download the little file. I will move the file onto my SD card. So I'm actually just dragging and dropping it on my other monitor here. Then I'm taking the SD card out, unplugging it from my computer, plugging it back into my cold card. And then I'm going to select ready to sign. And then my cold card is actually going to show me the same information. Is it okay for me to send this transaction to this address? I can review it. And if that looks good, I will hit OK. And it's signing the transaction here. So what the cold card does is it writes a new file to my SD card, which I'll then unplug from my cold card, plug back into my computer, and upload. All right, so I plug that back into my computer. I'll select upload. Here's my little file. Oops, right here. And I'll hit open. And here's my second signature. So this is the cold card signature. This is the Trezor signature. And then down here, this is what a signed transaction looks like. This is the data that we're literally sharing around the entire world when we broadcast a transaction. It's like another chunk of alphanumeric gibberish. So you always pay in Bitcoin, not for the amount of Bitcoin you're sending around, but the amount of data that you're sending around to the network. And if you have more deposits on an address, the amount of data that you're going to send around is actually larger. So this is what you're paying to send around here. This is why transaction fees in Bitcoin cost money, because this is a chunk of data. And I think the last time I did this calculation, it's about 341 bytes for a multisig transaction with one UTXO, and that can change just a little bit. So I'm not going to broadcast this transaction, but here's where you would select broadcast from Caravan, and your transaction would then be recovered. All right, so I'm going to pause here for another just round of questions. And we'll probably do about 5 minutes of questions so I can cover the last section of the demo quickly, and then we can have some time for some more questions.
Perfect. You had a couple of questions regarding the external recovery file and just different aspects of how to use it. The first one is from Paul. He's curious why the file is necessary to have if you have the other two keys. So maybe kind of explain the difference of the external recovery file and the keys themselves, and why you need both if you're using an outside user interface such as Caravan.
Sure. So again, the external recovery file, what it contains, and today there isn't really a standard in multisig for how this file is packaged, but at the bottom level, like the data in the file is all the same. So this is honestly how multisig eliminates single points of failure. is by separating this concept of this file you can think of as like the directions to your address or the map to the treasure. And then you need your 2 keys to unlock the treasure chest or, open the vault. So you need, in multisig, you have to have all of the public keys that were used to construct the address in order to find the address and then spend from it. And so that's why you need this file. You have to have all of the public keys to find your addresses and then spend from it. Now, with your 2 keys, you don't have enough information to find your multisig addresses because you don't have Unchained Capital's extended public key. The cold card actually stores this data on the device itself. So when you set up your vault, you install a little file, and the file again kind of contains all of this same data. It's packaged just slightly differently, but this is where in the future, where multisig is headed is there's going to be a standard for this file.
Perfect. And could you show everyone kind of watching where to find that file within their vault? Generally, your concierge onboarding manager would have you download this on your vault build, but it's super important to remember to do this for every vault because Roy is asking, since I won't be able to access my Unchained Capital account, where would I find this? So perhaps just go through that.
Right. So you do want to have this file in advance of the apocalypse scenario. I kind of think of this as your apocalypse insurance. So when you set up your vault, you just select this little menu here and you go to external spend information and then you hit download. The same thing for your loan. So if you have an Unchained Capital loan where you're holding 1 out of 3 keys to the address, you'll have a little menu in the deposit kind of window that you can select, and you'll have this external recovery as well. And
perfect.
yes, to
and
Justine's
James
point.
Had one question. Go ahead. I was going to say yes. So really important to know that this is a file you should download, and when you create new vaults, just make sure you do so. Very easy to find in the user interface, but super important. And then James just had a question about Caravan, that can you use both in theory? So perhaps touch on that, how the user interface of your vault and Caravan are not generally meant to be used together. Caravan is more of a backup plan, but maybe discuss why that is.
Sure. So yes, to Justine's point, Caravan today is designed as a recovery tool only from your vault. So for your vault, workflows, you should be logging into your account and using the deposit and withdraw and transfer. And this is because the vaults just have a lot more information that they're coordinating. They have a lot of business logic. They're going to check for, if you have your identity video and you're asking us to sign a transaction, they store your history and they'll show your balance history over time. And Caravan just doesn't have that. Caravan is stateless. It's very stripped down. If you clear your wallet here, Caravan forgets everything that just happened. So yes, from vaults, Caravan is designed as a recovery tool only. Now, as you can see here, you can actually use Caravan to build your own multi-signature wallet where you're holding the keys. So for the people who really like to tinker or more advanced users, Caravan is an extremely fun and interesting tool for learning just about multisig in general. What I could do is build, really any quorum size, 1 of 2, 2 of 3, 3 of 5, multisig wallet on my own using my own devices. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. But I'm a huge fan of Caravan. I think it's a very cool tool. And the reason we were able to open source it is because as a company, one of our long-term goals is to make multisig ubiquitous, right? We want multisig to be as easy to use as possible because it's our view that multisig is the most secure way to store Bitcoin for the long run.
Perfect. Then one other question about the external recovery spend, and then we have some more general questions, so we can maybe save those stand up to you. But one, we had a couple people ask, where is the best place to store this external recovery file, and perhaps go over why it's different than how you would store your keys.
Sure. So the recovery file, we suggest storing it digital and encrypted. So where I typically will recommend folks store it is if you have a password manager, you can add the file as a secure attachment to a password manager. Now, why is it okay to keep this thing digital but keys physical? Well, this is just information about your addresses. Again, it's kind of the directions to your addresses. If you're not logging into a wallet tool like Unchained Capital, you need to have the directions in order for you to find your multi-signature addresses. So somebody who has that file, what they can see is, oh, hey, here's your address, here's your balance. What they can't do is steal your funds with the file. So again, okay to keep it digital. It's really the same kind of type of information that we are coordinating with your Unchained Capital account. So you'll log in, of course, to your Unchained account with username, password, and two-factor authentication. The 2FA is kind of protecting that file essentially. So that's why we say, well, if you have a password manager that has, that is encrypted, you can attach it there because then you also have that kind of encryption securing it there as well.
Got some great questions today. All right,
Yeah.
Phil, do we want to move on to general, or did you have one more demo you'd like to do and then kind of do more of the general questions at the end?
Yep, I will do one more demo here, and I'm gonna actually switch into a different account for this, and then we will go into general questions. So this is gonna be just a quick demo. I'm logging into a separate account where I have a couple different contexts. So one of the most common questions we're getting today is with people who are starting to move their Bitcoin into a self-directed IRA and then hold their own keys. They ask us, well, hey, can I use my same hardware wallets to build multi-signature addresses or vaults in different contexts? And the answer is yes. So what I've logged into here is my personal account. What I can do when I have a new legal entity or a new account type set up is actually switch contexts into a different account. So I've set up a retirement account here called Phil Trust, and I want to build a vault using my same two devices under the context of my trust. How do I do that? So I'll swap into my trust context, and when I'm creating a vault, I have to upload new extended public keys from my device because our contexts here are totally separate. So from Unchained's perspective, we don't want to share data across contexts, so people can, from one login, have a personal account and then collaborate with business partners in a business account without any overlap of data. So what we have to do here, though, is upload a new extended public key, because remember, extended public keys are used to build series of Bitcoin addresses. So I'll give my key a name here, and what I typically recommend is give the key the exact same name as in your other context, because what we're naming, when we name a key, what we're really naming is the seed. So this is the name of my seed. The seed lives on my white Trezor here, and I can use my Trezor in as many contexts as I would like for single signature addresses, for multi-signature addresses, and so on. So give it the same name, you select the device, and you have to make one advanced setting. So by default, from our seed, we go here to find the first extended public key. But if you're in a new context, so if you're building a vault, a vault for your self-directed IRA, you actually need to use a different extended public key. So you select this little menu up here and you hit show advanced, and then you change this last 0 to a 1 for your second account, or a 2 for your third account, or 1,111. At each one of these little locations, your seed is going to go and look up a totally new extended public key, or really derive an extended public key. So the extended public key that lives here is totally different than the extended public key that lives here. So it's kind of magic, kind of the magic of cryptography in a lot of ways. But I'm going to go look up the extended public key at M4501111. And I'll enter my PIN for my Trezor here, and it should spit out a new extended public key. So here is the extended public key that lives at M4501111. We'll look at the last few digits, JYGVH, and then we'll upload a key, an extended public key maybe that lives here. And we'll see how that changes. Totally different, right? Same device, different extended public key if you have a different location of the extended public key. So this pathway is from your seed, give me directions to an extended public key. This is why you can use your hardware wallets for single signature, multi-signature, business multi-signature, trust multi-signature without any overlap, because it's a one-way function. So once you've exported your XPub, then you just hit next and create, as I'm sure you all have already seen. So I won't go through those other steps, but I just wanted to let folks know how to do that, so that now, if you're interested in getting a self-directed IRA and building a vault and holding keys to your retirement Bitcoin, you can do that. All right, and that wraps up the demo portion of the webinar today. So I've spoken a lot about our different kind of advanced features, and so now we can kind of let's cover a few questions about uploading an extended public key in a different context, and then we'll go through the general questions.
So there's a couple questions about keys, not specifically uploading the XPub, except Stephen does mention using a passphrase for the same seed to generate a different XPub. So you might want to touch on that with multisig, because I know that does kind of cause some extra hurdles, we'll call them. So maybe let you cover that, and then I'll scan through to see if anybody else has questions on the XPub specifically.
Yeah, and that is a great question. And the passphrase is, I think, one of the most powerful, and not necessarily in a good ways, pieces of functionality added to kind of hardware wallets that I've seen. So what a passphrase does is it appends a 13th or 25th word to your seed. So I'm going to try to go back to my slides here. So a passphrase would be the 25th word to this seed. Now, that's nice for single signature, because then, if somebody finds your 24-word seed, they don't have your Bitcoin. But the problem with passphrases is that it is a critical single point of failure, where if you forget your passphrase, you're now no longer holding your key. So a lot of folks have actually lost Bitcoin just by forgetting their passphrase, because then they're completely locked out of their key. So multisig, because it eliminates a given seed as a single point of failure, it's our view that it's really a best practice not to add a 25th or 13th word passphrase to your seed if it's used in multisig. Because again, if somebody discovers a multisig seed, they don't have your Bitcoin. They have one key and they can't find or spend your Bitcoin. What's more likely to happen, and we actually have had clients that have forgotten their passphrase, and then we have to go through with them and try to break their passphrase. And that's the other thing, is passphrases kind of try to solve for something that Bitcoin multisig solves for natively in the Bitcoin protocol. So I would actually suggest not using a passphrase in multisig. I would suggest changing the extended public key pathway location, that BIP32 path, as an alternative. So same seed, different location for a different XPub.
All right, so one other question for external public keys, then we may want to move on to some more of the general ones. But Hugh had a question. He's using Swan for DCA, and he has the auto withdraw set up that using the wallet address, but they have an option for an external pub key instead of an address. And would that work with his vault in order to provide more privacy, if I can speak correctly?
So the auto withdraw, I actually think auto withdraw is kind of a dangerous setting in a lot of ways, because you're sending to an address automatically, but you're not taking that time necessarily to review that is still your current address. So you can auto withdraw to the same address, but again, if you ever spend from your vault address, it's going to iterate to another one. And really, you can auto withdraw to one address in a single signature wallet as well, but the same thing kind of applies. If you spend from that address, it's best practice not to withdraw to the same address. So today, what I would recommend is, if you're dollar cost averaging, it actually can be a lot more cost effective if you withdraw into a single signature wallet. And then once your single signature wallet gets kind of at a value where you're like, ooh, I want to move this into multisig, then you make one transaction into multisig. Because again, since multisig is constructed with a little bit more data, multisig transactions are just more expensive than single signature transactions. So with that XPub question, with one XPub, you can generate a series of single signature addresses, but what you can't do is find your multi-signature addresses from one XPub. So in order to find your multi-signature addresses, again, you need your wallet configuration file. You need your directions, your map to your multi-sig addresses.
Awesome. So Daniel has a great question, in my opinion, about when you spend from any address in Bitcoin, right, is that your change goes to a different address, right? This is what we call change addresses. And he's asking, how do we check to confirm that the keys that he holds control that address on our user interface?
Somebody sent some Bitcoin to the Unchained whiskey team fund. Thank you to whoever that was.
I was saving that for last. Hank said he donated and he was curious what kind of whiskey that would be used on. So I was saving that very important question for the end.
Thank you so much, Hank. Now I have to switch into another vault, but much appreciated. Okay, so yes, when you're authoring a transaction from your Unchained account, you will see the next address in line. So I'm logging into my Trezor Cold Card vault, and if I hit withdraw, I can now send back to any Bitcoin address, back to an exchange or to a single signature address or wherever, or I can hit transfer and send from one vault to another vault address or from a vault to a loan address on our platform. Now, here's where you'll author the fee, and this fee is estimated again based on kind of the network and the demand for block space, but you can also adjust it. Although if you adjust it down, then you have to wait longer. Then you select who's going to sign the transaction. So you can sign with your 2 keys, or Unchained Capital you can ask Unchained Capital to sign with our key. So I'll sign with my 2 keys just to show. So once you've authored the transaction, then you're taken to your transaction signing workflow, where on the right side, you can see what's happening. We're sending from our Trezor Cold Card vault to vault number 7. Unchained Capital recognizes that I have 2 out of 3 keys to this address, so I can confirm this address on my device. And then the same thing here as well. My Trezor Cold Card vault address is going to change to this new address here, which before I complete the transaction, I can confirm on my device. So I select confirm on device, I select Mises. And again, on the cold card, you go to Address Explorer, you open up the file and you'll take a look. But on my Trezor here, I'll just hit connect, and I'm checking Mises on my Trezor here. All right, and then what I can see is this change address, is appearing on my device. I have one of the keys and I'm good to go. Great question.
So a couple more questions about some more of the technical aspects, and then some overview questions about some of the products or what to do as far as legacy planning and for joint accounts and those sorts of things. One of the questions from earlier from an anonymous account was, if you're sweeping your vault due to high TX fees, what is the best security and privacy practice? Sweep straight to your new vault or use an intermediary address? So asking how to condense that data for transaction purposes. Pretty sure best practice there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just create a new vault and you could switch between those vaults. No reason to send to some outside address. But maybe you can kind of touch base on that a bit.
Yeah, correct. So just from a high level, what the question is kind of getting at is, because multisig is kind of larger in terms of data that you're passing around the network, eventually it becomes a good idea to kind of consolidate the number of chunks of data that are living in that address. So here's what an address looks like with a bunch of different chunks of data. By making one transaction, you're consolidating or compressing all that data into just 2 chunks of data, one where it's 1 BTC and one which is change. So there's a couple ways to do that. This is our What the Fees article, and I definitely recommend everybody give it a read. It's really, really important and explains a lot about what's happening. But back to the question at hand, what I recommend is, it's good to have a couple of vaults, and then you can just switch from one vault to another vault. The other alternative is, if you have a mobile wallet and you want some spending funds, you just send, however much Bitcoin out of the vault to a different mobile wallet, and then your change address is constructed, and all of the change is deposited in that change address as one chunk of data.
Perfect. And then with that being said, there were a couple questions about being able to make multiple vaults with the same keys, ensuring that if they did that, they don't have to use additional hardware wallets and it doesn't affect their current vault, how they can create endless amounts of vaults, and maybe kind of touch base on why that is. I know we kind of touched base on the pathways earlier, but maybe touch into that a little bit more, because there were a few questions about that.
Yes, so you can build as many vaults as you would like in whatever context you would like from just 2 hardware wallets. And in fact, there's actually a lot of security benefits of minimizing the number of items that you're protecting. So instead of using a new hardware wallet for every single every single thing that you're doing here, which increases significantly the amount of items that you're actually securing. Yeah, just keep it simple. Use 2 devices. Now, technically what's happening is, let me cancel this transfer here and then I'll show you. Technically what's happening is when you build a vault using the same 2 hardware wallets, we are grabbing a new extended public key at a different location. So we take the one that we uploaded and then we add, so I uploaded M450211 and then we've appended this 1. So we've been like, from this master XPub, let's get another XPub at 1. And then for your next account, it would be a 2. And then your next one, a 3. The next one, a 4. So all of the vaults are totally separated, but it all starts from the kind of master XPub that you upload. So good to use as few items as you can to build vaults, because protecting more items does not necessarily make you more secure, since it just kind of broadens out the number of things that you have to kind of remember and account for.
Awesome. So then we had a couple questions about joint accounts and mostly planning for legacy planning. Alexander was asking specifically if Unchained would give the wallet configuration file to a family member, just in case they can't access it on his encrypted password. So maybe touch on, in the case of a client's death, what would happen if a family member contacted and so forth, and what information, they could access, and sort of maybe touch on that slightly, because there were a couple questions about that.
Yeah, so kind of a couple things. So really on our side, we can be really flexible with however your estate plan is set up. So if you just want to set up a will, so first of all, primary advice, work with an estate planner to figure out what is right for you and your family. That is the first thing that you must do. From there, your estate planner might set up a will. They might form a family trust. We can be flexible on our end. If you have a will, all your loved one needs is a single seed or a single private key and the legal documentation, like a probate court order, and then we can help to recover funds. We're not going to sign transactions for just anybody who shows up. We will have to wait for the legal process, but we will follow, of course, all of the kind of legal process for that. If you have a family trust, you actually have a little bit more flexibility. So you can onboard multiple members of your family as users to Unchained Capital. You could even give one of them a key. And then what we're able to do is just follow the rules of the trust and work with whoever is the current trustee. So whatever's right for your family, we can support on our end. But first and foremost, it's identifying with an estate planner what is right for your family.
Perfect. And then there was a question about joint accounts, if they're available, if they'll be coming available, and perhaps touch on business accounts, how you can have additional trustees if that's something that's wanted. James, I think it was James. James was asking about that as well.
Yeah. So when you have a business account with us, and a business account is a very broad term, it accounts for trusts and LLCs and S corps and all that stuff. You then have the opportunity to invite multiple users. So each individual user has their own unique login. So in the context of a trust, you could have your login, and your spouse or family member would have their own unique login. We do have plans to release joint accounts where 2 people are the legal owners of the account, but we don't have a timeline identified for that. So it is kind of on our long-term roadmap, and we'll get there eventually. But really today, most of the inheritance workflows can be covered from just good estate planning with a legal counsel, and then the either personal account or trust contacts that we have today.
Awesome. Well, I know we're hitting up on time here. We did have some really great questions today. A lot of people were asking if this is going to be recorded and posting anywhere that they can come back to review.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're recording this currently. I probably should have let people know that in advance, but we'll share it out in the newsletter and post it on YouTube. But wanted to give our Vault clients kind of exclusive access to this, because it is kind of continuing education as opposed to just like why use multisig, which we would like to actually do a kind of some broader webinars in the future, both on continuing education as well as just helping people understand multisig a little bit better.
Absolutely. I'm hoping this is the first of many for both our clients to kind of help educate you guys more and more. We know that the concierge onboarding is a quick process, and sometimes there's additional questions, and just you want to go over things again. So I think this is a great way. And then also, yes, to branch out to other individuals in the space that perhaps have questions on multisig. So I'm going to throw it to you, Phil. Do you have any sort of a wrap up that you'd like to do?
Well, that's pretty much all I have for everyone today. Thank you all so much for joining. And you know, we have a lot of really exciting things coming out for Unchained in the future. And so, just before we head out, just to remind people, you know, our different suite of products and services. So the vaults are really the foundation of our platform, and our concierge onboarding will walk you from A to Z with setting up a vault. So you all probably have vaults already, but if you have loved ones or family members that you would like to have holding their own keys, send them our way. We'll walk them through the whole process, and then we put some Bitcoin in their vault. And then on top of that, you know, once you have your vault, we're your lifetime financial partner. So we're thinking about things like inheritance. We're thinking about things like your business, your trust, your retirement accounts. So if you're interested in, you know, purchasing Bitcoin, for example, in a tax advantage retirement setting, reach out to us. We're happy to help walk you through that. We have an OTC desk so that you can buy Bitcoin in large chunks of $50,000 or more directly through us, and it shows up into your immediate control. And then finally, of course, we do have our loans. Friends don't let friends sell Bitcoin. So if you're ever getting to the point where you think you want to access some dollars, use your Bitcoin as collateral instead of selling it, and don't incur those capital gains taxes. We're happy to help. Thank you all again so much for coming, and yeah, hoping to do this again in the future.